And welcome back to the show. We are excited to interview Paula Mosteller, former co-founder of PetExec. Paula is one of the foremost pioneer entrepreneurs in starting, scaling, and selling tech-based pet care services in the US. For those who aren't familiar, PetExec is a web-based software platform designed for pet care service providers, including pet boarding facilities, pet daycare centers, and pet grooming businesses. It offers a suite of tools to help manage and automate day-to-day operations such as online booking, customer management, scheduling, and payment processing. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Paula. And I'm just going to
Hi.
chime in real quick. He mentioned former
Yes.
owner and executive because we know that you had a successful exit in the spring of 2022 to selling to Kinship, which is the pet care division of Mars Incorporated, as in Mars Bar,
Yeah.
and many other things. And actually, the fourth or fifth largest private company in the United States, which we
Yes.
worked on together, and that was amazing. And we'll get into that, but we're looking forward to hearing from the ground up. So thanks
Oh,
so much
yeah.
for joining us, and let's dive in here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I can't wait.
Yeah. It is an impressive company. And I think what doesn't get represented in that short overview is how PetExec helps businesses streamline workflows, improve customer communications, and then for these business owners to utilize the reporting and analytical tools you've
Mhm.
built out. There's a lot to get into, but Pat's point, there's no better spot to start than from the beginning. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background,
Of
how you got
course.
started in your professional career leading up to PetExec?
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you the edited version because I'm no spring chicken. But when I graduated from college from University of Colorado, one of my first jobs out of college was with a software company in Washington, and I really really enjoyed it. So that gave me the bug. I got bitten by the bug of software, and then moving forward many years later, I started working for a web development company in Colorado Springs where I met Paul, my future business partner. And so we started working together there. So we worked together actually 22 years. There, we went off on our own. But what we were looking for, what our vision was something a little bit unique because this was during the time when people loaded software on their computers. They didn't pay monthly and have a web based experience. And our vision was we were going to bring that into the pet care space, which was kind of neglected. People didn't really think of those businesses. I don't think they took them very seriously at that point. So we just, on a wing and a prayer, we just jumped for it. We started it out with one client, and then it grew and grew. It was not an easy beginning at all. I just want to make that clear. Nobody believed in us in the beginning. Absolutely nobody believed in us. We had to believe in ourselves.
And Paul, I'm
So,
curious because you went from a web development company
mhm,
to almost this, I mean, the SaaS model. I mean,
mhm.
how did you pivot? What was the water cooler talk like with Paul to say, where did you get the idea? Where did you decide to pivot? Talk us
I
a little bit through that in more
I
detail.
wish it was a more glamorous story for your listeners, but it actually came about because I was a web developer. I went off on my own, as did Paul, and he would do the back end, and I would do the front end, so the marketing. And so we did work for a dog daycare. Just make it really quick. We developed a software for them to utilize in their one location. Um, you So what we did was we were trying to figure out a way to take this on a grander scale because in this industry they didn't have choices, so they would have to either use a PC that was loaded with a certain type of operating system. They just didn't have options at that time. To make a long story short, Paul and I kind of talked about it. I asked him one day very quickly, I said, well, what do you think? You want to give it a whirl? And he said, okay. After that, PetExec was born. We just got a business license. We said, we're going to try to do this. We did not quite know what to do because we were kind of the trendsetters in this space. So I don't know. We just kept trying. We just kept powering through, and people didn't believe in us. They mocked us in the industry. Um, that's just, we were just kind of a little too stubborn to quit, maybe. But we did believe in our vision, even when other people did not. So I would say it went from web developer, where Paul would do the background. Paul is my business partner, but he would do the background, kind of the where people log in and have transactional, interfaces with the browser. Basically, when people go on, when you log into a system of any sort. So he was the one who was building this, and I was the one selling it. So it was just the two of us for many, many years.
Now, the transition from your W-2 to PetExec, did you just jump into the pool, or did you dip your toe in a couple late nights after work, kind of the side hustle, which then became the full-time job?
I wish I could say that I could just do it as a full-time job. Now, I probably could have, because I'm married and my husband, has a good job, but that's just not my style. So I wanted to, I worked many hours. When I say I worked many hours, it's like we were never off. So I still did websites on the side, as did Paul and I. We did other projects while we were building up PetExec. Now, he actually had a full-time job at one point, and this is kind of an interesting story. I made a deal with him. I said, I really want you to come on full-time. He said, I have to make this amount monthly. So I said, I will bring us to that point in 3 months. And I brought us to that point in 2. So if you give me a goal, I'm pretty scrappy. I wanted very badly to achieve that goal. And thankfully I did. He did quit his position and work on PetExec full time. And then that's basically the history. We just kept growing staffing as we needed it. And then I had a few trips along the way, trips and stumbles, but we just powered through until Mars came a knocking, and we did respond and talk to them. And with a lot of help from Pat and his team, we made a deal.
So, Paul, I want to jump in here for a second.
Sure.
Take a step back. So,
of course,
your co-founder and partner, Paul Nero, almost like Nero, but
yes.
Business partnerships can be hard, right? Mm-hmm. And especially when you each had full-time jobs, you're doing stuff on the side. Talk a little bit about, you obviously had a lot of confidence in one another, that you're going to spend all this time and this person is going to, you're making a commitment. How do you know that they're going to deliver? Take us through that a little bit, because most business partnerships fail. Sure. Yours didn't. Right. And talk a little bit about the difference in your skill sets and how you made the partnership work, because that was obviously instrumental.
Yes, that's a very good point. Because it's not like we were not without conflict on ideas, and some visions changed. I would usually get my way after a while, to be honest. I'm very persistent. But one of the things that and Paul and I are still great friends even today after we sold the business. But one of the things is that you have to trust that person that you're going into business with implicitly, because it's like a marriage. It really is. You cannot, if you're having a bad day, and I've had days where I was so upset. I didn't let it show to our clients, of course, but I just wanted to quit. I just had it with all the rejection, and I tried, getting sympathy from Paul, and he says, "Well, you can't quit. We have customers." So you get to the point where you cannot quit. And that other person sometimes will be the one, maybe not in the nicest way, like Paul was not super nice about it or sympathetic, but I knew and he knew that we had to push through this. We somehow in our minds, I don't know where, but we just felt this kind of compulsion to make this business work. We could not stop. And so it's a difference in personalities, true. One little argument or conflict should not, it should be a bump in the road, and it should not be something that's going to dissolve a partnership in a business, especially one that we saw with a good trajectory. Trust in a partner is extremely important. I always knew I could trust him, and he always knew he could trust me, even if he was mad at me, or even
So,
if our
so
ideas differed.
did you, was it always kind of a 50-50
Mhm.
kind of thing in terms of capitalizing it, even Steven?
One of the things that we did not argue about was we stayed in our lane. Let me sell. I love to sell. I love to market. I love going to trade shows. I like being out in the community doing podcasts and things like, with the pet related community. He did not like those types of things. He wants to program. There were things that I had as ideas because I was kind of a liaison with our pack mates, which were our clients, our pack mates. That's a name that we really took seriously because we felt like a family relationship with our clients that we so I would be a liaison seeing some of their needs, some of the future of this pet care industry and what kinds of things they're up against because they're out in the fields. And I felt like I really needed to have a good community and a connection with them. And sometimes I would express that to him because he didn't have as much of a, day-to-day contact with the actual people down in the trenches. But we made it work. We figured it out. There was like every other relationship, like a marriage, there's always a little couple bumps here and there, but you make it work. You power through.
That's
You
a good
never give up.
analogy. Is the marriage analogy, and in some cases, and I'm curious if you knew what your strengths and weaknesses were for each other before going into business because you did work with each other for quite some
Yeah,
time,
we did.
or like in marriage, you kind of discovered it along the way.
We did. And one of the things I'm a little bit more of, um, we're both driven in different ways,
Yeah,
but I guess I like to get my own way. I'm like a youngest child, and it wasn't just for me, it was for our customers. I knew what their needs were. I felt such a family connection, and I think Paul did too, with our community. These are the people who entrusted us because it's running their entire business. This is their livelihood. We can't For us, this is very important. They rely on us and they need us to give our very best to them. So it wasn't something we took lightly ever. So we both were very aligned in that way. We both needed to make sure those customers were happy and that they knew that we were putting in our very best that we had to serve them.
in the right amount of conflict in business is good. And I
Yeah,
think
I think
what can
so.
be tough for some, especially when they have personal relationships and then
Mhm.
go into a business relationship, it's hard to take that critical feedback the right way. And so, was it a lot of kind of, one person had the seashell holding up that could speak and have the floor? And I mean, were you over communicating at first until you found your groove? Or what did that look like so you were both on the same page, knowing, hey, there is going to be conflict, but we're both doing it for the right reasons?
With ours, I would say that it wasn't that much of an issue, to be honest,
Yeah,
because we had work to do. It's not like we weren't busy.
right.
I needed to get things done, and we'd get in a little fight with each other, and then the next day it's over. You leave it. Next day, I might have been, reeling a little bit, and we just let it go. You just let it go. It's not worth the damage that you could do because you're having a little moment or something. So we're both kind of tough in that way. We just don't have a high need to be, coddled or anything like that. So we really were both on the same trajectory. We wanted to move this thing forward, and we didn't want to let anything get in the way, including each other.
That's great.
That can damage a business.
So
Relationships.
Paula,
Go ahead.
you were really complimentary, and it worked, and
Mhm.
that's huge. And you read that the best business partnerships, everybody, the partners are
Mhm.
more than two partners recognize the different strengths, right? A lot of times
Oh
when
yeah.
everybody has the same strength, you tend to have similar weaknesses. So I've got a question. Talk to
Sure.
kind of shifting gears here a little bit.
Sure.
I always find it interesting in a tech business or anything subscription based.
Uh-huh.
Tell us about sort of the demand curve and how you build your pricing. How did you come up with that? How did you say, here's how we're going to price it, here's how we're going to sell it? Take us through that.
Okay. You're talking about the pricing for our actual business to sell it, or pricing for our clients?
For clients and
Okay.
how you
The
monetized it, I guess is
subscription
what I'm
model.
getting at.
Well, many years ago, there was no such thing. Or there was a few little companies trying it that do not exist anymore. But anyways, we decided with a web-based business, it just makes sense that these people, it's like almost like having a cell phone. It's You need to pay for it monthly. You don't buy the cell phone. You have the service kind of comes with it. We were web-based. So when we introduced this model, you can imagine the pushback we got. So people would say, "Why would I buy your system and have to pay you every month for the rest of my life when I can just purchase this software just once?" And then my comeback to that was, sure, you're only buying it once, spending thousands of dollars. What if you don't like it? And you still have to pay for the support of that software. My contention is that if I'm running a business, that I would want to have a system with support that comes with the subscription. And also, anytime you have an update, you don't have to wait for somebody to mail you something. You get an update, and the technicians, our support personnel, which is very important for a business like this, you don't have to download anything. You don't have to know software or anything like that. All you have to do, you wake up in the morning every time we have an update, and it's done. And it's exciting. So we were going, instead of looking at um, the things the competitors were doing, which I think is really important in business, I just didn't have time to worry about what the other competitors were doing, especially since they were all didn't really think that we were a threat to them, because nobody would this they thought that this idea would not catch on of a web-based model. So I went out there, got a lot of rejection. We just kept on going. We kept on going. We had to believe in it. So the way we set our pricing was we had to do some metrics. I did some math basically to decide what the market would bear. I wanted it to be affordable for the type of clients that we have, but not overpriced to where it would attract them to go with a model that was something you would load on the computer. As time went along, it got to be much, much easier, so that we could increase our prices quite readily because of the obvious advantages, security and otherwise, of having a web-based model. You just can't trust you. If somebody were to steal your computer or something, all your system would be gone. All of their data would be gone. With us, you don't have to worry about it. So there's many, many different reasons why this was a good idea. But just like everything else new, like AI, people don't trust it in the beginning. They don't.
Sure.
They have to be we had to build our trust with them because
Now,
we
through
wanted
that
them to be able to
rejection,
trust
though,
us.
did you create a stronger value proposition?
I think we did. And I think that's what we had to project to these people. We're seeing them and they're always asking why. Why would I pick you over this? Or, you know, it's just this constant need to see the um, risk and reward, And also, these people are running a business, so it's very important the decision that they make. So when I was showing them this system, it wasn't like I was had a cookie cutter mode. I would go in there, I would look sometimes on their website, I would see how their because this is dog pet daycare. It's kind of like a hotel
Hmm.
and with boarding. So I would look at the way their system was set up. And when we had a presentation like this, I would kind of talk to the way their specific company is being run with their business particulars. I think people don't realize it. They're all completely different. Some people have daycares, boarding. So what I would do, I think that was a little bit different than the competitors, was myself and Michelle that worked along with me. She's still there. We would present to the needs of that particular person that we're talking to, because if I'm just blabbing on about, oh, this our software does this, it doesn't speak to them and to their needs. I wanted to be the one who would speak to their needs and what they needed in a software product. So it actually got to be pretty easy because I knew that it wasn't about me. I was concentrating on their needs and what was the best solution for them. So that kind of worked for, you know, we could raise our prices to the value that the market would bear periodically. And then we grandfathered in people who believed in us when nobody else did. And so we had a long standing um, row of basically clients, our pack mates, that stuck it out with us because we did care about them and we did provide an excellent value for them.
So I want to stay with that because that's an important sales lesson here too. Is your discovery process was probably different, right? You weren't trying to sell a one size fits all solution. You were doing your due diligence, seeing what they were using. Within that discovery, is it the motivation for these entrepreneurs? Are they all the same or do they differ? And then, yeah, I want to learn a little bit more how you leverage that within the sale. And then
Mhm.
eventually, I do want to get to the first sale that you make that you're like,
I
we
do have
got
a
this
fun
one.
story about the first sale. Well, it's true that there's a lot of competitors out there, and they're used to the same old stuff. When these business, and I think a lot of times people do not take them seriously. They are in pet boarding and daycare. They have birthday parties for dogs. They do grooming, and sometimes people might not take their business model seriously or think that it's a one size fits all. It's not. It's not. We have customers in Australia. Things in Australia work differently than here. Things in the Midwest are more popular than, if I'm selling or if I'm presenting something to somebody on the East Coast, like California or New York or on either coast, where their needs are going to be different. But I will tell you, it was a shock to me, but then I got to know it just became every day is that every client, especially the ones that are non franchises, of course, have a distinct way of running their business. It's not always what I would recommend. And sometimes I would say that I'd go, why are you pricing this way? And they go, well, I said, why are you using tiered discounts? I said, it's you're pricing your way into you know, losing money because you're offering too many discounts. And it's the way you position yourself and it's the way you you're selling yourself as a discounter rather than a quality service that people would want and need. If we're talking about our kids and our pets, we're looking for a quality service. We're not looking for the cheapest deal in town, right? So I would recommend to people see yourself for the value that you create and price accordingly and do the math because it's kind of important because I
The
think a
math
lot of
is
people were
very
running
important.
their
So, Paula, this is great. You really what I find interesting about persons like yourself and other entrepreneurs we've talked to that have had success is that you really do kind of a grassroots sort of interview of the customer and figure out the differences, which is fascinating. Do a lot of listening, right? Um, one thing that is going through my head is how did, based on this feedback, what was your high level sales strategy? I know you went to a lot of conferences, but
Mhm.
once you develop the product, you go, "Hey, I think this may have legs." How did you get it out there en masse? What was your strategy to take this mainstream?
Yeah, what I did, especially when it's just the two of us, and continue to do, is I did a lot of internet advertising, a lot of it. That's the best way to advertise in a business like this because you would pick, Google AdWords, pay for position, basically, where that's basically the search engine that people still use. And so what I did was, I had targeted um, keywords, of course, and pay per click. And I would look at that from time to time to see how it was progressing. And Capterra, which is, I think it's changed name since then, but it's a software. Um, it's basically kind of a portal for you. You display the different softwares that you're looking for. And I actually talked to them on the early stages to get a category for kennels. Now there's a lot of different kennel softwares. I mean, once we started all this, I mean, we started off a snowball of people competing with us and all of this, but I went on that. And also, I really think we should never dismiss the really important need to have relationships with other communities within whatever business you're in. For instance, I really made friends with, the dog gurus, which were good consultants, and had them on shows, and they had me on shows, and so thousands of people could listen. And I wasn't trying to sell anything. I was just trying to, talk about ideas about marketing, what do you do during an emergency, what happens with COVID, and how do you, bring your business back up, things like that nature that really don't necessarily make me any money, but I don't know if they do or not, but it's not important. We need to be people that are helpful to the community. And so other resources that, international pet services industry, I get to know all the leaders there and, make my face known and help them and promote them as well. So relationships, I think, were really imperative. Even the people who didn't like us when we first came out and didn't believe in us, they switched gears after we started doing well. And then but I think just for making sales, especially when you're first beginning, you've got to get a great and target those keywords. Otherwise, you're going to just blow through money
Fascinating.
left and
So now,
right.
is this something that did you learn this from the ground up, or did you have a expert part of your team on the marketing side and that's
Or even a mentor?
right.
Well, can I tell you a funny story? It's short. When I went to Mars is this gigantic company. So Mars Petcare owns a lot of big companies like Banfield Vets and all this. And so Kinship is basically a technology arm within the substructure of Mars. And so here I am, with a small team, and they were saying, they were asking me about an agency, and I go, "Oh, we don't use an agency. We use an agent's me." So I did it all. I created the ads, designed because I used to be a web designer. I wrote all the copy, all that stuff, marketing and sales. I did all that, and most of it I did because, believe it or not, it was very hard to get somebody else who wanted to do sales with me. I don't know why, but I finally found somebody who was crazy enough to join me in that journey. And so Michelle, was very good in sales and things like that. But really, I this is just something I felt like I didn't want an agency to do. They don't know the industry. They don't know it like I do. And I could tell the people who use like a just an ad agency to create their ads, they're just so not targeted to the community that we're targeting.
So
They're
what I find really fascinating about what you're telling me, and a couple things going through my head is, A, what an amazing businesswoman you are I
Oh,
can tell command of the numbers, the marketplace,
thank
learning about your customers, really personalizing your business is what you're sort of saying, which I find interesting too. I mean, it's very hard for third party to get inside of your head, right?
true.
The other thing is man, it's exhausting kind of. I can only imagine. I mean, I'm tired just tired listening to about all of your responsibilities. So, which is so talk a little bit about that.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sure a lot of this is not sexy, right? Most is not sexy. You wear a lot of hats. Take us into that. What's the day-to-day like? And, what should other aspiring entrepreneurs expect on that front?
Well, expect the unexpected is the only thing I could tell them because one of the things is you kind of have to have a good sense of humor. And with me, I do have a lot of energy. I think I wear most people out. I've always been this way. So it's just, you just have to look at what you're good at and stay on that trajectory. And what you're bad at, let somebody else do, right? We were able to find, people along the way. Like, for instance, accounting is really not my cup of tea. Um, I really don't love it, but there are other people who do. So there were some other people on our team that we hired who were good at the number crunching and that sort of thing, and then the outside accounting and all of that. But one thing that I found that I seemed to just really enjoy and love was just the connections I made. I loved going to work every day because um, I have basically when talk to people, I just kind of do a kind of a soft, just trying to see if they would be a good fit. And then I have like a calendar link where they can just click on and I'll look in the day and I'd say, "Oh, I've got this many presentations today." But before the presentation, usually 15, 20 minutes before a presentation, because I like to be prepared, I would look at their website or I would look at any way I could see any kind of indication of the way they run business, what kind of services they offer. Do they do daycare and boarding? In this industry. And then I'm very excited to talk to them because I kind of get a little feel. And I would ask people, what you're looking for, because I wanted to make sure that the message was all about them. I'm there to provide them something valuable to them into their business. I'm there to help them. Because if PetExec doesn't pay for itself over and over and over and over again in a month, then it's not a good system for them.
Mhm.
It's not. So I was very, you know, honest with people too. Sometimes they were too small, or sometimes it was just way too complex what they wanted to do, that it really wouldn't be suited to any kind of software. But they have these dreams in their head, and sometimes people want to overcomplicate things and they want you to write the software to that complexity, which just wouldn't make sense. We have to do it for masses of people. But I think I probably forgot the original question, but that was my day to day. I basically would do presentations. I'd make sure a lot of it was marketing too. Like I get very excited when like we'd have contests to see who looked the most like their pet, and everybody likes to show off their pets, right?
Yes.
Or what's the funniest costume for this? And we just made kind of a game, and I would give prizes. We made a game and made it fun. Everybody works hard, but this is what we do. This is what we're created. We're put on this earth to help people, right? So this is what we do. And this is what it's very fun for me. It's not always fun. I mean, to sit there and have to write things and the other things that go on with just running a business, and things don't always go your way and people get mad, and people get mad and they're elevated to me. And I think I told you what my nickname was.
Well, I
Um,
don't know if everyone knows, so maybe you could
can
share.
I say
Yes.
it? When people would get very angry and they're yelling at the support people, I would tell them before the first day on their job, I'd say, if anybody ever acts even the slightest way abusive to you, you stop it. Send them to me. I'll take them. Because that's why they call me the bitch whisperer. Because you get the meanest, terrible, complaining, angry, because I think typically people, when they're like that, they just want to be heard.
Mhm.
So I let it go and I go, oh, are you having a bad day? And you just let it out. 99.9% of the time after the call, they were fine.
Sounds
They
more like
just
you were a
needed
therapist than
somebody to
anything.
listen to them. There's a lot of psychology in this job. There is.
That is
There just
that is
is.
great.
And I embrace it because I felt like if I'm making somebody's day better
Yeah.
before, like they come to talk to me and they're not very happy, if their day's a little bit better after they get off the phone with me, I've done something good for the day, right? So I just want to be more than just somebody selling software. That's never the way I want people to feel, that they're just a number on a graph, that we're just counting the money we make off of them. They're family to us, and they knew it. I think they knew it. I mean, this is not my business anymore, but I'm hoping they keep up with that, and I think they will because it works.
I think that's apparent with the way you handle your day-to-day business with your employees, but also the fact that you're putting yourself out there, with these conversations we talked about earlier, joining these conferences or podcasts or interviews. Yes, that's good for the brand, but you're also being viewed as the expert in the space, right? That you're offering something to people who might feel lost. Um,
Absolutely.
you had a good story that I really want to hear about your first customer, because we're talking about
Oh,
the rejection. I think anyone who's ever sold a product or service knows rejection all too well.
oh
And
yeah.
it's that one sale or the initial sale that just can add some new lifeblood and life into you, essentially. So
Yeah.
tell us about, you went through the trials and tribulations, you've changed your value proposition, you start doing research and discovery, and now you make the first sale. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I'll make it very quick because it wasn't this quick. But when I was working for this other company, she had a pet daycare, and I was doing the marketing for the website, basically. When we decided that relationship kind of left, well, she was selling franchises, and one of the people came out and talked to me, and this is since she had never actually went and sold a franchise or anything. It just was a total bust, and I knew it would be. But anyways, he came out, and I really had a connection with him, and I felt kind of bad that he had come all this way and talked to her, and I guess it wasn't a great meeting. And I was on my way out, as was Paul. We had not wanted to work with her any longer. So he and I spoke briefly, very briefly. And I told him my idea. I said, this is before I talked to Paul. I said, because he was buying a pet daycare for his, he's since passed. But he is really the spark for PetExec, David Baylor. So anyways, he was buying this business. He goes, I'd like you to develop our software for us. And I said, well, it's kind of, it's expensive. And, I was thinking more like I would want to do it on a grander scale so that we could have this software available to others, um, you know, even internationally. And he just looked at me. He had such pretty blue eyes. He was, older gentleman, about 80 years old. And he said, that's a great idea. You should do it. And I said, well, I'm just, I'm a little bit. He goes, oh no, it won't fail. It's a great idea. And this guy was very successful in his life, very successful. So um, I kind of told him I would. And so I had to come back to Paul. Paul knows me. I asked after I've already accepted for him, but I went to Paul, and we're basically family. And I said, hey, Paul, what do you think about this idea? And he goes, sure. So we did that. We started our very first location was in Grand Forks. They flew me out in an airplane, everything. Felt like I would just made it big in the world. We had one sale in PetExec. But it was so exciting for me. I just couldn't believe it. It was so fun and so exciting for me that I knew somewhere deep inside my mind that this was where I really wanted to be. And even my husband, who had his doubts, I'm sure, but he knows how I am. He said, just go do this full time. Just do this. Don't, do whatever you want, but I think you should go for it. And
And
I
how
did.
often did you go back to that customer for advice or soundboarding? Because what I've seen in some businesses, it's amazing. They'll make their first sale and then they ignore the customer. And and I'm
Yeah.
curious, did you utilize, especially because of your relationship with that
Mhm.
particular customer,
Oh,
utilize them as a soundboard?
well, actually, we're still friends on Facebook with one of the gals. And strangely enough, the same year that I sold my business was the year they sold their business because the sisters were about my age. I mean, we're all retirement age. I am. And so they sold their business in that same year. I thought it was kind of, they started with us and they ended on the same time. But it's not just them because I don't want to burden people with, mountains of questions. But I think people would be very surprised to know that their clients are very happy to give suggestions. So many, many times, not only did we have a place for them to give recommendations and a link for all of that, and we organize and meet on those, basically feature requests, if you will. But oftentimes I would have, questions out there on because we have a private Facebook page, a Packmates page where only the Packmates, the people that were clients, could get on there and say, would you think about this feature? What is it? What feature that do we not have that you like? Sometimes it just starts to snowball. And sometimes people will take it as, oh, that means you're going to create it just because we say it, right? It's not so fast because every feature has to be connected. There's reporting capabilities that go along with all of this stuff. So it's a little bit harder than what a lot of people think. However, if you're in technology and you're wanting to help people, you always have to be one step ahead, right? You always have to think in the future of what's going on in this industry and some other things that could happen. And just surprises. And people gave us great ideas for features. Some of our best features are ideas from our client base. So I would say them as our first customer, but we were selling more customers. So after a while, we get, upwards of 1,000 customers. We would ask them and we would get ample numbers of people. And sometimes some of their ideas were better than others. Some of these people have really wild, crazy ideas that would not be great ideas, but they still have a place to vocalize them and to chat with us about them. So yeah, we did that all the time. We were kind of in a little packmate group, a little private group. We had, over 1,000 active participants in there. So they would chat amongst each other and all these different things. And we gained a lot from listening to them. But we were like this big group of people that had the same, I want them to be successful. The more successful they are, the more successful we are. So we
Right.
wanted to make sure they could even learn from each other. And sometimes it had nothing to do with the sales of software. There was an emergency, a fire or whatever, and they were saying, oh no, or they got into a lawsuit, right, Pat? They go, I don't know what to do because this person's threatening me with their lawyer and what should I do? And they go, okay, make sure you go into PetExec, you have notes and there's documentation and da 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 da. So people have sailed through audits using the PetExec reports. So many, 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 many things can happen in a business environment, but your customers you have a job because of them. They don't have a job because of you. They're their first priority always.
It's a good point. And along those lines of your first customer and revenue growth, yeah, I guess it's a two-part question. So one is, now you get your first customer. Does it then become word of mouth? It multiplies. Is it the outbound, inbound sales strategy that starts to take off? I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. And then also, I'm curious, as the revenues go up, right? When do you make the decision of, do we keep a little money in or do we hire the next person? So if you wouldn't mind answering those
Yeah,
questions?
those are loaded questions, Brian. So one
A
one of
very
the things
curious person,
I can tell. No, with our first customer, of course, getting your first customer is hard. And then people would say, on these, and I would dread it when they'd say this question. They go, "Well, how many customers do you have?" And I didn't want to say like 3, but it is what it is. And so we're just getting started, and I said, we're not as interested in the numbers as we are in the satisfaction and happiness of our customers. So if you're doing the right thing, the numbers are going to happen. So what I would say is normally the trajectory that it was word of mouth, because people in this industry, it's a small niche group of people and they chat. If some software company is not doing what they say, or they've got dishonest, you know, means or whatever, they're chit chatting. They have these little forums. Some of them, we're not allowed on as a vendor. So there's a lot of chit chatting, and it's very powerful. But I would say for our advertising efforts, our Facebook was one. Reviews, we always got excellent reviews. On Capterra, we still have more reviews than any of the other competitors. I think we have like 600 compared to their maybe 100 to the next top competitor. Um, I just hedge my bets. I don't pinpoint 1 or 2 different things. I like to try several things, because one person might be flipped on by this way, and the other person might need a more personal approach. So in other words, I would use these Google AdWords to get reactions from our customers that were like Australian or New Zealand, or Canadians that just can't pop over to the United States and go to a trade show. But for the other people that love to learn and they want to have be able to go to places with a lot of learning, like a trade show has, where they have classes, those people need more face-to-face interaction, where they can actually come to the booth and one of us will sit there with a phone or whatever and show them the system and ask them questions about their business and what they're looking for. So I went to about 5 trade shows a year. Okay, it's a niche group of people, and I can tell you they can smell a rat. These are smart people. These are your earthy kind of people that work with their hands, that can smell a rat. Let me tell you, they come to our booth and they can tell who's going to treat them right. Not just who has the fanciest features that sometimes are not that great of features when it's all said and done, but the flashy sales guy over here, it's a different sales guy every trade show. But they would see it's always, the same people, always the same year after year, the same relationships that we had with our vendors. So I don't think it's one, thing. If I had advice for a business, I would say form relationships with the people in your industry, which is going to be different than mine, and form community relationships and stick your nose out there and chat with them. Don't be shy, because a lot of people have questions and they're looking for people with answers. And be a problem solver. You solve somebody's problem for them, and they're basically a customer for life. I mean, a lot of our customers, the first one I told you about was our customer for 15, 16 years using PetExec.
So, Paula, you and Paul bootstrapped the
Yes.
business from a
Mhm.
cash perspective, right? And I'm just curious, did you ever entertain um, venture capital money, or was it something that's it sounds like you were in a position to keep going? Were there times where you thought that you'd run out of money? Take us through that piece.
No, that's a great question, because here's something for business owners. The minute you start business, there are slimy venture capitalists, people trying to give you loans, all these things. Let the buyer beware. Most of them are not worth the time you would spend on the phone to hang up on them. So absolutely, we have had It got to be almost on a daily basis. Venture capitalists wanting to either offer money or wanting to acquire us nonstop, and they're very aggressive. So I would go to a trade show, for example, and I was always the first there and the last to leave because I wanted to make sure the booth was all nice. And so I was there alone at one point, and there was these guys that were very aggressive, and they waited till I was alone to get, to kind of corner me in my booth and talk about this and give me a wine. I mean, I was born in France. At least if you're going to give me wine, don't give me cheap wine. Just saying, but they did give me a bottle of very cheap wine, which I never drank. But anyways, so I just don't be naive. These people are not there to help you or your business. They're just watch it. And
Well,
that's
I mean, you know this too. It's obviously if you're Google and or you have a company that requires $100 million, the investment is important. There are certainly good groups out there, but I think what you're saying is really important. The bottom line is once you accept money, to a degree, you work for the investor. That's just the bottom line,
yeah,
right? So
yeah. That's a great point. And with all things too, like for instance, when Mars wrote to me, when I first saw the email, I thought, oh, kinship, it's one of those other slimy investors. And then I looked it up and then it said Mars. And I go, wait a minute. And then I looked it up and I go, oh, they really are with Mars.
there could be something
Wow.
here, right?
Maybe there's something. So I've had others that I have had meetings with over the years, maybe a handful of them. I just did not like or trust them at all. So, but when I reached out with them, and I thought this was going to be part of a very important topic, and if it's not, I'm just going to say it right now. If you're going to sell your business to, especially to a big company like Mars, going it alone is a bad idea. And I considered it because I like to bootstrap everything. My husband, he says, oh, I'm used to working with lawyers. I'll just have him do. Boy, we had no idea how complex it is. And if you don't get a good lawyer on your side, there's little hidden things in that contract where they could come back and get you in 10 years and say, something happened and, you have to pay back this money or whatever. And so you have to, this was very new to me. I didn't want to spend all that money to get a business banker, but talk to a CPA and he says, oh, just go on the internet and figure out what your value is. And I go, it's just a bad idea. When you want to make that step to sell your business and you put your heart and soul and sleepless nights and all of that, that's not the place to skimp on money. It's worth every penny. And I have said this to anybody who asks me, and I'll say it to all your viewers. Pat Linden and his team.
Hey, listen, I make sure you admit that I did not pay you for that endorsement, but I will take it. I'll take it.
No,
Thank you.
I'm telling you, it was unbelievable because they have to put up a fight for you. And there were things I was and I'm pretty tough, but like certain attorneys that came out, like Allison, your associate of Pat's, or I guess of both of yours.
So, Paula, I want to dive into this a little bit. So, explain the differences in going to the sale process, right? We all in business have contracts with customers, and
Mhm.
the customer is not really the adversary. Not that an acquirer is the adversary, but they kind of are, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's a different kind of thing. What would be your advice to somebody at that stage? How to evaluate it differently? What are the differences in what you might think versus
Oh,
reality?
did I learn the lesson of a lifetime? I feel like it was just such a daunting task. And I remember when you get a big company.
So, Paula, I'm curious to know. It's you and your partner. You're scaling the organization. You get your first customer. You get your second customer. Now you have this revenue coming in. At
Mhm.
what point was, I don't know if it was a number, or if it was just based on workload, you decided to hire your first employee. And then from there, how did you continue to grow and scale through the hiring, obviously, of these employees?
What was interesting is, and we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but both of us were doing work on the side while we were trying to get this business started. And Paul actually had a full time position. So I made a deal with him. I said, how much money do you need? Because I have to set a goalpost, right? So
Mhm.
I said, how much money do you need in order to do this full time? And he gave me a number. And I said, I'll have it done by, I think, July. And I had it done by June. And what that did was then he was able to quit his position that he didn't like anyhow, and we could do PetExec full time. Okay, so just having that was amazing for me. As the years progressed, we learned some very important lessons about software. One of which is that you can have the best software in the world, you create the best software in the world, which is great, but that's only 50% of what you need to do. So, what the other 50% is making sure people either use it, number one,
And pay for it.
use it correctly. No, pay for it, we've got, because people would just be afraid to start using it. So, what we started doing is I said, I need somebody to help me, because before I was just training people. I
Mhm.
was setting it up for them and training them a little bit. For many years, we just had them set it up themselves, which was frequently wrong. Not very many people I've met love working with software and setting it up. I do, but not many other people do. So as we progressed, we hired our first employee, Greg, to kind of help me out in the realm of technical support and training. And then one of the best things we did, and everybody was kind of watching us, our competitors, and they followed suit because this was very successful for us. We started requiring every new client Packmate, it's in our list of what you pay for, is you get, it is paid where we set up the system for you and to your business requirements, and we train you. You cannot believe how important this is. In this type of business,
And that was not common at that time.
oh no, oh no, oh
Non-existent is
no,
probably better.
oh no. So people, you're running your entire business. Can you imagine if it was set up wrong and the numbers are incorrect when you're checking out a client? It's a disaster, and they come back at us screaming and all this stuff when the software is a tool. It needs to be used correctly, like every
Mhm.
other tool, like a saw. You don't want me to use a saw because I'll saw my arm off or something like that because I probably won't use it correctly. Same thing with software. They don't, most people in this industry and others, a lot of people I know, they're just wonderful business people, veterinarians, all these fancy degrees, all this stuff. They can't, software is really not their cup of tea, right? So they struggle a little bit with it, where other people just, it's kind of who they're drawn to it. So what we did was we hired our first employee. And one thing I learned from that was I go, gosh, we could barely afford him. But as business started going along, I learned a really strange lesson that I did not expect. And that is you should hire anticipating the need. Okay. So you should hire ahead of the need because training those people takes a lot of work. So I was kind of apprehensive about this because we started training. We had some managers and people like that. But if we need support people, what they told me, well, why don't you hire two instead of one? I'm going, thinking about the money. Boy, if you can knock out two support people, because sometimes one of them will drift away and maybe, has a health problem or whatever. Um, it's expensive
Yeah.
to train employees, right? So we learned that trick that you hire ahead of the need and try to hire two at a time in order to fill the same position so you can train them both at the same time. So as far as that goes, it had to do, I mean, we were pretty profitable after We were never not profitable because we never took out a business loan or anything. So we were always a cash positive business because in our business model, people go on the website and they sign up for a subscription and it's automatically billed. So there's no sending them a bill. It's automatically taken from their payment, right? So I don't think that, it's important to kind of look at your numbers and crunch your numbers to see if you can employ even one person, because it's just, you have to make sure you're, looking at your overhead and how much
Mhm.
you can afford. However, you better start getting help or else you're not going to be in business very long, because it wears on you having to do absolutely everything all the time and having that kind of responsibility year after year. And if you get sick, you I mean, you still have to go to work. It doesn't matter if you have a fever. I mean, I've gone to work with a fever. Um, but I'm just that kind of person. When I got
Yeah.
COVID, when we were still in the middle of I'm probably, no, it was after the acquisition where um, I had a 9-month transition period with Mars. And I did get COVID and I wasn't feeling well and I had to go to work because I felt like it was my responsibility. When you don't have other staff, um, you still have to be on. So my recommendation is hire above the need if you possibly can, because if you're looking forward and you've got your eye on the prize, you are going to create more customers and be able to pay them. That's the least of my worries. I needed people to help us to have enough people to support the people that we were bringing on board. I can, I think it's easier in a sense to sell the product or service that you're using than to actually have people to service them. So make sure you get good employees and treat them great. We did, and they a lot of them were long-term employees. So I think it's kind of, I was a little long-winded there, but in a
No.
nutshell, hire above the need and make sure and treat your employees like you would family, because they're doing a lot of hard work for you. And we wanted to make sure they knew how much they were appreciated, because we were very lucky. We had staff that would stay with us for, 9, 10 years.
Wow.
So we didn't have to keep hiring and hiring because they had really good job satisfaction, because we always backed them up. If there
So
was
your
something,
employee experience, it sounds like you did something, right?
oh,
And
well,
so,
yeah.
yeah, please tell us a little bit more about that, because I think again, when you're hiring, it's a two-way street, right? The employee's not just taking a paycheck; they want to be inspired and they want to enjoy what they do, because outside of their family and friends, you're spending the most amount of time with your work colleagues.
Well, I spent more time with Paul than I did with my own husband because I worked with him and my
Yeah.
husband would work. Now we're both retired, so it's a little different. But you're right. The That employee that's working for you, as long as they're the right one, and you have to really make sure that's the right one before you hire them. If you can find a good employee, you hold on with both hands. They're
Mm.
like gold. You don't want it. You just, it's so hard to find great quality people. If you can find some great quality people, you hold on to them. They're family. You treat them wonderful. And when I left, somebody had said to me, one of our staff, they said, "You always had our back." I said, "I always took, like, if a customer is being really nasty and I had to, they were being unreasonable and demanding, and then I am the bitch whisperer, so they would send them to me and elevate them to me. Okay, I earned that title, but I didn't want them to have to deal with that. I wanted them to have, not have their day ruined. I knew it was going to ruin mine. I'm used to all the rejection and people, getting upset over nothing. Because for the most part, people, your customers, even the ones that are mean sometimes, they're still a customer and they're still valuable to me. And maybe they're just having a bad day and they need somebody to take it out on. And that might be me, but it's not going to ruin my day. And I certainly don't want it to ruin my employee's day. So let me take those. And we were very appreciative of their hard work. And they were like family to us. They knew if there was something going on in their life, they needed to take a day off, there was a funeral or, whatever it was. We always were very considerate of them. We just didn't want them to be hindered in any way by feeling guilty that they couldn't do something, that we would help them every step of the way. So we were very, very fortunate to have long-term employees, and a lot of them are still there after Paul and I left. So, and they're really enjoying, flying around, to New York City, to corporate and all that. So it's really kind of fun. So I'm extremely proud of them and excited for them because it's exciting, right? You want your employees to be satisfied with their job, and you also, of course, want them to do a good job. But if they're satisfied with their job, they typically will do a great job. So we're very lucky in that, because sometimes it's not easy. And they'd have to power through a few situations when they did.
So Paula, on that too, we talk a lot about psychology on this show because we think that's a really important part of business,
Mhm.
and you talked about it earlier. I know this business ownership's a grind. You've told me there were times it was a grind. You wanted to crawl in the corner. Tell us how you kind of got through that. Were there times
Mhm.
where you just said, "Hey, this isn't going to make it"? Was failure not an option? What take us through the mindset, because you kind of do everything and it's probably pretty hard to turn it off, right?
Yeah. I think part of it comes to personality. If you're a driven personality where you feel like people are waiting on you, you're always feeling like, oh, if I don't do this, I can't leave things hanging. So that kind of a personality, which is kind of on the neurotic, a little bit neurotic on the spectrum, that's typically a pretty good trait for a business owner, because um, you don't want to leave things a mess, right? So you also don't want somebody to have to wait an extra day to get an answer. Sometimes our customer service was a little bit too good, because I could not go to bed at night without checking my email one last time to make sure everything was, you know, people were good, because I wouldn't be able to sleep. Um, so it's a mindset. Paul and I are both that way. Paul, my business partner, and I are both that way. So how much responsibility you take and is very, very important. And if you say you're going to do something and you kind of blow it off, that sticks with people. You say you're going to do something, you do it. And don't think that they're going to be, oh, well, I forgot. No, they will hold on to that. So you have to be very aware of that person on the other end needs you. They're looking for a hero, right? They're looking for somebody to solve their problem. They're looking for a problem solver, a hero. That's you. And there are some days where you don't feel like being a hero, right? You get somebody and just insults you or whatever, and sometimes I can brush it off. And there's just some days where
You want to be the villain.
I want to yell back at them. Yeah, I want to yell back and say, look, you're no smarty and you're this, but I can't say that. I can't be that way, because I'm there to help them, not the other way around. So there's a few different things, because my daughter worked as an emergency room nurse. So I learned this lesson from her. She goes, oh, people swear at me. They spit at me when we're trying to help them. There's drug addicts. She's been kicked. It's all noise. She goes, oh, it's all noise. So I started using that mindset. Sometimes people will get mad and they have a good reason to be mad. There's other times they're just, I don't know, they're just needing someone to be their sounding board who's not going to fight back. But you have to go like that. It's noise. Now, there are some days, oh boy, where I have to act a certain way. I can't show weakness, of course. I solve their problems. They're not appreciative. I'm feeling a little bit sorry for myself. And when the workday is over, then I go, I hate this stupid. Nobody appreciates me. I feel sorry for myself. I want to cry. I cry to my husband. But the next day,
It's a reset.
you gotta put
Yeah.
that smile back on and reset yourself. You renew your mind
Right.
every day of your life because you go, okay, God's given me another day. I'm going to put that smile on my face and I'm going to keep on going because really it's just part of the job. They're paying you. They're paying you. It's not
Right.
like you're doing this on a, on a volunteer basis where you're not getting paid. Well, sometimes the first, few years of a business, you might not get paid, but just brush it off. It's just noise.
What
Just
was
let it
your
go.
outlet?
Great
Because
advice.
you're of service to everyone, and that can be mentally and physically draining, whether it's your employees, your customers, or other. What was your outlet? Did you have an outlet? Like, how did you,
Oh,
aside from, like you said, crying to your husband some nights, like what did you do to kind of help yourself balance and reset?
yeah. My husband's the same as me. We're
Yeah.
both driven. But yeah, well, I do have, and I think it's very important to have a work-life balance. One of them is, well, I do have kids, but they're grown up now. They're, you know, adulting, um, which is hard too. But I'm very athletic, so I go to the gym. Very, very important for your mind. Um, I also, play pickleball, and we're pretty competitive, my husband and I. So we get out there and we play like we're serious about it. So we play and we have fun, but we also are learning new things and stuff like that. You do have to get things in your mind, whether it's athletic or other activities. I love learning languages, so I'm learning Spanish. I live in Arizona, so it's really convenient. I get to speak Spanish every day of my life. But you have to take your life is kind of compartmentalized. You have your work life, you have your family life, you have your leisure life, and they're all important. You probably spend the most of your life at work, or at least I did. So I had to make sure that I had something to look forward to at the end of my workday, and also having a few little bumps go on in my workday. It's not going to ruin my day. I'll just go play pickleball. Just hit a few balls, I'm good. You can't let pressures get to you like that.
Mhm.
I mean, for a little bit you have to. You're going to go crawl on a ball or whatever. I've done that. I've done it. I think I actually had to be really dramatic about it. I had to like cry aloud so my husband would hear me come in. Oh, I'm having the worst day. And he's like, "Oh, you're fine," So he knows me. It's just you're a human. You have emotion. You'll feel these days where they're not. You want to just quit.
Yeah.
I've tried to quit a few times, but the next day I come back into work.
I mean, pressure either bursts pipes or it makes diamonds, right? You made a lot of diamonds.
Well,
So,
what's
Paul,
that saying?
I want to transition a little bit into tell us again when the company started.
It started in 2006.
Okay,
October 30th.
2006.
Mhm.
So you're at it for a while.
Yeah.
2022 is when you had your exit. Was that on the horizon? Was that something just came about? What was the end game?
Well, that's a very interesting question because we always had our mind to sell it at some point, but we were content. We know we're getting up there, but we were content, but it would have to be the right buyer because, and here's another thing about business that people don't think about when you're going to sell it. There's a lot of people who will want to buy it. They're just not the right people, right? I don't want to sell after all the trust that we've put into our clients, all the work I've done. I don't want to sell it to some company which I anticipate would not give the level of customer service. I've seen companies go through acquisitions and completely fail their customers and it's just a total disaster. So I was very aware of that, and my feelers were always kind of when these companies would approach me, and there were many, many, many. I would get approached 1 to 3 times a day because they
Wow.
knew it was a good, you know, positioned well. We had a good reputation. Um,
And
I don't know if they,
you had a product no one else had.
yeah. So it was in the back of our mind. Now, I have to say, maybe it was fate, maybe it was divine intervention. I like to think, maybe it was that because it did work out so beautifully. But I did get contacted by um, Kinship, which is a technical arm of Mars Petcare, which is huge. Mars, a lot of people say, "Oh, I've never heard of Mars." I go, "You probably use their products every single day because they have the division for um, human food, like rices and other kinds of things. Um, Pet care, which is the division that bought us, and everybody knows about the confectionery because who doesn't love the spokes candies, right?
Right.
They were all upset over the controversy when they got rid of the spokes candies, but the spokes candies are back. The best spokes candies, I think, in the world. I love the spokes candies. But anyways, they did approach us, and I I have to say that people will think that selling your business is something somewhat like Shark Tank, where you get on there, you give a few numbers, some billionaire will say, "Oh, yeah, I'll give you this for this." Okay, it's all done. Well, at least in my case, that was not the way it went down. So, Mars is a big company. They're very experienced and they have a whole team that handles acquisitions. And so when I'm talking to them, they're asking me kind of questions like, "Oh, well, have you come up with a number?" And I go, "Well, I'd have to, well, next time we meet, just come up with a number." And, going, "Gosh, I better come up with a number or else they're going to think I'm a total amateur. Well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want them to think that." And so I didn't know what to do. I'm talking to CPAs. I don't know. I didn't have resources. I wish I had the BizMafia. Where were you guys?
Seriously. Well, that's why we created it,
Yeah,
right?
there was nothing for me other than having a good friend who was in the financial industry who said to me, "Oh, I know a guy who does that. Go to Biggs Cofford. They work with the best. They're, all this." And then I looked at, I'll tell you what, they're not the cheapest in town, but I understand why. In
Mhm.
fact, I thought about it. I go, "We could do this." I mean, I sold our house by myself. I mean, I never needed a realtor. I got top dollar. I'm in sales. I can do all this. Well, I was wrong because going to Biggs the day I signed that contract with Biggs Coford was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And let me tell you, they were not cheap, worth every penny. Because let me tell you a little bit about this process. I'll try to give you an edited version so I don't lose you. But um, Biggs Coford does the accounting and the negotiation part of the business, right? So they also have a legal team. I can't remember the name, Pat.
I
I'm
can't
just kidding.
either.
Could it be Pat Linden and Associates? So Pat worked with the legal team in order to negotiate the sale. Well, these guys are, you want to have them on your side, let me tell you, because you get these fancy lawyers sitting in a room with all these questions because we are all meeting on this, terms I've never heard in my life. And you've got that lawyer there. There, for once in my life, I'm not the one with the answers. They all have the answers. They tell me, they were every step of the way, they knew what to do. Now, I would highly recommend Biggs Coford. I would highly recommend Pat Linden and his associates. It made the process, which was painful. I'm not gonna tell you a lie. It took about 6 or 7 months of back and forth negotiations. But let me tell you, the price we got versus the price that if she would have given me the number that I would have come back with, they would have said, "Sure, we'll sign up right now." So I'm glad that I was able to take my business, take it to people who know what they're talking about. The brokers or bankers, I guess they like to be called, with a legal team. You cannot go on your own and do this.
You raise a great point that I wanna illustrate here.
Mhm.
And I think it's part of the gig with a big, whether it's private equity or huge company like Mars, public companies. I mean, they've been around the block when it comes to these kind of deals, and they're never going into overpay, right? I mean, they're not, they give you a carrot, it's nice, you were going to make real money, you may have never had to work again, but there's that fine line between going, how do I get the extra 20, 30% to get to sort of the your bottom line and probably their bottom line. A lot of business owners are afraid to have the hard conversations or really it's just negotiating, right? But it's there's the pressure, there's this opportunity. Take us through that. You did an exceptional
Oh,
job in that process of kind of, giving a no to get to yes, which I think is critical for selling owners to understand.
yeah. I wanted them to be aware at the very beginning, at our very first meeting with Mars, um, that I wasn't desperate to sell. It's not like we were even in the market to sell. If the offer were good, including that of the viability of the company and everything would be what we're looking for, we would consider it. But that doesn't mean that we're on the market or that we're desperate to sell. And I told her, I said, my intention was to work for maybe 5 more years ish and sell at that point. We're at a very good trajectory right now. We're not stopping anytime soon. And we actually made money during COVID. So we were one of those companies that it's very, the pet care is similar to the way you treat your pet and the way you treat your child. You're not looking for second best, right? So this is it's basically a recession proof business. We could tell right away they wanted this company. They wanted it. So I'm not going to act like I'm desperate or anything like that. Although I was really excited about it, to be honest, but I have to show a certain way. But I was not prepared with all my sales, and I've been in sales and business for many, 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 many years. I just didn't have what it took, like the team. Chris Blees, these are all CPAs looking at they had to count every hair on my head. And now I know I don't have a lot of hair, but it's a lot. Every number, every penny, every contract that we had employees sign 16 years ago or 15 years ago, they wanted all those documents. And it's hard to find them. And I'm pretty good at organizing things like that. But, there's some employees that, I couldn't find the agreement and they'd left and, I had to get them to re-sign it. Thank you, Allison. He knows who Allison is, who convinced me. She was, come
Allison
on.
Kinnear, shout out.
Yeah, Allison, you're the bomb. She's like, I was about to cry. And she's like, no, just ask one more time. I'm going to ask you just one more time. And that was the time. And he goes, sure, of course, So anyways, so I had to create all this paperwork because they were in guns a-blazing for us. First of all, Biggs Coford is very good. Second of all, they get a percentage of what I get. So if I'm successful, they're successful. And let me tell you, they're not going to take a low ball offer. Even I think if I would, because any offer we get, we thought, we could retire quite easily. But anyways, they, one point that I thought was kind of a funny story was, they gave an offer, which was a high offer. And I said, oh, well, what do you think, Paul? Because we talk about, he goes, sure, let's take it. Okay. And then he goes to me, oh, Chris, Chris, please. Oh, you know what? Just, we'll go negotiate. Just, you don't have to do anything. He goes back, he goes, no, they don't like the offer. We're going to put it on a broker. We're going to broker it out. They go, oh, no. Here, we're going to offer them quite a bit more. So that offer was almost, I would say, close to the very top of the value of the company. I mean, it would have been ridiculous. No other company would have paid probably more than that. So
That's awesome. And there's a lot of brokers and look, there's good and bad brokers, there's good and bad bankers. And when you look at the percentages, sometimes there's a diminishing return as to how far they're going to push it. even
Right.
though they're getting a cut of the deal. I mean, which is
True
important,
enough.
right? So it's easy enough to sometimes go, it's like I've never met a real estate agent that said it's not a great time to buy or sell, depending on whether what side of the equation they were on, right? So there that does exist. And I think that's an important thing to have somebody. I think you have to have a financial advocate in these deals. You have to have a strategic advocate. You've got to have
True.
a contracts advocate. And they advocated for you to get
They
top
sure
dollar.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sure did. They earned every penny. And then, so, but here was the other thing that they were quite aware of. I said, you know, this is a labor of love. Like some people just go to work and they don't like their job, whatever. That wasn't the case with us. We actually really love what we did. It was hard, but we love what we did. So any company that we would sell to had better be a good company. Well, as it turns out, Mars has big plans for PetExec and much bigger than anything we could have done with our small team. So we were elated to do this. But can I just, I don't want to embarrass you, Pat, but can I just tell a little bit about the experience I had with, they had suggested a great legal team with Pat and his legal team. And I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but I had no idea. When you're, think about it this way, when you're selling, and I think to at least a reasonably sized other company that's wanting to purchase you, they're going to hide things in the small print to reduce their liability, but they don't care about your liability,
No.
right?
Yeah, of course.
Not at all.
Right.
So they're looking to protect their own interest. Well, one thing that Pat did is he would point out things. I go, I would have never noticed that. And most lawyers would not. They would not because they're not in mergers and acquisitions, right? So basically, they're leaving the liability open for, like, I think it was 5 or 10 years. I go, anything could happen in 5 or 10 years. And then they can come after me and say, well, you didn't cross this T, I don't know. Somebody came out after, so what we negotiated was, I think a year and change, a year and 6 months or something like that, that we would put money in escrow. And at the end of that time period, as long as nothing went wrong, and knock on wood, nothing has gone wrong, everything has been smooth as silk, then, they pay off those things. But here's another thing I want to emphasize. The ability to have that kind of a team behind you, the business banker, and I know there's good ones and bad ones. I got a good one. And to have a legal team that specializes in mergers and acquisitions, and I got a good one. That made all the difference
Tell me
in
where
the
to send the
world.
check. Tell me where to send the check. And
No,
no, I'm
I,
kidding.
I
I'm
feel like
kidding.
what I
I
paid you,
appreciate it. Thank you.
what I
Thank
paid
you.
you was worth every penny, let me tell you. And it was worth every penny. One of the things too is just if you own a business, in fact, I'm retired now for 4 months. So I ran into somebody I hadn't run into, and they said, you look like you just look so, because, and I feel like I had a job I loved, but it's still stressful because you have a lot of responsibility, and I take on responsibility. I feel very connected to my clients and my team. I don't want to disappoint them. I can't sleep at night unless I'm trying to make sure everything is going well. But it's part of what you go through. When you sell a business and you go through whatever months worth of negotiation and due diligence, that'll take a lot out of you. But when it's all set up and everything is done correctly, when you have a really amazing team behind you, it was like smooth as silk. So I was hired on by them as a contractor, both Paul and myself. They hired every one of my employees. There was a few bumps. Thank you, Allison. So one of our employees was not happy with the whole thing. And she, Allison was trying to talk to her and she was kind of like this, and so we had to kind of get through that. But that 9 months, they gave me milestones that I had to achieve the first 3 months, second 3 months, third 3 months, or the 9 month goals that I had to achieve. Smooth sailing for both of us. So it just went so well. Now I
So,
could have,
Paula, I think you're a great example, and I want you to speak to this a little bit. You got the offer; it was a high offer. You liked the offer. Oftentimes, I think clients, though, that don't do sell companies every day think, well, that means that the money's going to be in the bank, and the money's not going to necessarily be in the bank. It's just it's high level for the most part, right? And then there's 9 months. Talk because we had a lot of these conversations, right? Talk through sort of client level where the money could have been eradicated. And I'm not just talking about legal issues because there's accounting issues and the accounting issues have to
oh, yeah.
make their way into the contract and they have to be adjusted. And I'm a big believer in that kind of collaboration and I like numbers too. But,
Yeah,
you know, I'd like you to expound upon that
of
because I think
course.
it's misunderstood the pure legal role and just because you have a letter of intent doesn't mean you're going to get paid that. Can you give us
Absolutely.
your perspective?
Absolutely. Now, when you go through a due diligence process, when they say due diligence, it's like every speck of every penny you've ever spent since the beginning of the business. And we were open for 16 years until now. They're looking at everything, trajectories of what's anticipated, your projections for growth. They're looking at other things, like we had a merchant account representative, what our rev share was, how much that's going to grow. They're looking at, we talk about competition. Um, we had maybe like one other competitor. The rest of them, I could tell they weren't going to be able to really compete with us on a serious level. We just had really one. I was very honest with them about that. I showed them, like our number of reviews, our reputation, the fact that they were bought by some crazy little venture capitalist company that came along, and of course they tried to buy us. So they're looking at all these little minuscule little things that you might not think about in your own business practice. If you're a small business owner, you might not be thinking of all these little things that could possibly go wrong, where somebody could maybe
Or it eats into the
fault.
price. It eats into the price because the
Yeah,
numbers have to check out, right?
absolutely. Well, you got a team. We had a team of CPAs, plus my husband is an engineer who loves numbers, and he actually found a few little, you know, 800 here, little things. And we did, since we're a cash business, we had, bank records and things like that to um, collaborate what we had said. But they asked really picky questions. Like they were thinking maybe we had business, like we bought our own business supplies under the table so we could kind of make it look like we were more profitable and all these other things. So we had to prove a lot of these things were not the case. And when you've got like pretty high level lawyers from Mars, not the planet, but the company, asking you all these questions and potential liability and these words I'd never heard. And I said, "Well, have you ever had a judgment for that?" I don't even know what that means. So the fact that we were a company that no one had ever tried to sue us, no one had ever, of course, people get mad and they'll threaten you and with things and that don't come to fruition. But we were so clean in that arena, luckily. But if we weren't, there's remedies for things like that. So if you think you're just going to go prancing in, they're going to give you kind of a range of a number, and you can just say yes, and the money's checks in the mail or whatever. It's not that easy. Sometimes you have to negotiate when you get it. You have to negotiate after the sale. There's a transition period, and then they'll put money in escrow, maybe a percentage in escrow, and that's up to your lawyer, which was another thing that they wanted a lot of money in escrow. The Pat said, we're going to negotiate this down. So they didn't take that much and put it into escrow. Nothing that would bother the sellers, right? And they're going to make sure that they get what they pay for.
They're going to make sure that's a great point. They're going to make sure they get what they pay for. So
That's right,
make sure you
as they
have
should.
armed yourself to get what you think you should get,
As
provided everything's clean and on the up and up. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had milestones, and I didn't want to sell it and just walk off and, go suntanning in my backyard or something like that. I committed to them 9 months of my time. I worked full time. I completed those milestones that they set out for me, which I didn't think were that hard, to be honest. Anyways, they're not used to workaholics like me and Paul. So anyways, we completed the milestones, and the transition out of there was quite easy. Had we tried to do it ourselves, I am sure we would not have made either that deal at all, or we would have made probably half the amount of money we made. And who knows? But thankfully, this is one thing. If you're selling a business and you're listening to me, you want to call me, I will tell you the truth. I am not getting commission for saying this, nothing like that. You better get the best company you can on your side, especially if it's a bigger amount, because you don't want somebody not looking out for your best interest that knows what the heck they're doing. If you have your brother's uncle's cousin that's a lawyer that you want to do this for you, think again. You need to have a lawyer that specialty is in mergers and acquisitions. I recommend Pat Linden and his team, because they were freaking amazing with us.
You have a new job as a marketing.
Well, I see. Yeah, I see. You have the ability to hire a new spokesperson.
You do. Yeah. I mean, what do you want to do in your second career? I mean, we're hiring. No, I'm kidding. No, Paula, you are
make me an offer. No, I'm kidding.
You were a joy to work with. You took it serious. Everybody who's successful on those deals does, and super appreciate that. And it was my pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you. It was our pleasure too. And I have to say, and some of the, things behind the scenes that people don't see, like at Mars, we're in these meetings and we're all like, oh yeah, well, I'm trying to look kind of serious and business-like at some points. And, they're trying to talk, because I know they told them, like some of the gals, there was one gal I used to work with years ago. I think she's the one, anyways, she's since not there anymore, but anyways, they were just trying to, I think they were telling, make sure they're happy. They're writing all these nice notes. Oh, well, da, 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 because they wanted to make sure that I felt good about this sale. And it's actually turned out to be absolutely beyond anything that I would have imagined. But would it have been if I wouldn't have had a legal team like you? Would it? No.
Paula, I'm curious, because maybe this is a question for you as well, Pat, is Paula, as you're going through this roller coaster of emotion, right? Mm-hmm. You see this number. You said earlier, look, I was probably 5 years away before I was considering an exit. Now you have this number in your head. Now you see this momentum building. How do you keep your emotions in check, and not just keep them in check, but then not just cave, right, to certain demands that you feel could destroy the deal that you have there?
Well, I had a few moments where tears were flowing. I will just confess, I didn't want to show it to Mars, but there was a few things that I needed to find, like contracts from years ago and different, things that were like 14, 15 years old that you don't always have right there at your, I'm searching. So there's hours and hours beyond my workday that I had to find those things. And some of them I had to call employees from years ago and ask them to re-sign things. And I mean, so there's a little bit of that was painful. Yeah. And I just felt bad about myself. And I just said, I wish I would have done this better. And, you go through those moments of self doubt. Everybody thinks, oh, these business owners and, you look at Elon Musk. I wonder if he ever has a sad moment or whatever. Of course he does. Everybody has moments of self doubt, or they're going, oh, what if they're judging me and thinking that, you know, wow, she's not very smart if she doesn't have this available like that. And so I did go through several days of just feeling horrible in that sense. However, when you have a team that's kind of, they all told me, okay, everybody goes through this. There's no company we've ever represented that hasn't had a few little, you know, loose ends that you need to find. It's not a big deal. I have a tendency to catastrophize everything. So I did what I had to do. It's just, you have to power through it. But you're right. There are those times where, you know, I think we've all gone through it. They go, am I making the right decision? Oh, what if, those crazy what if. What if I blow this whole deal if I can't find this document? Or what if? So there were times where I was afraid that I was going to blow it and ruin it for everybody. Um, Luckily, that did not happen. But you're right. I mean, you go through a roller coaster of emotions, and it is hard. It's very hard. But the reward comes after the pain, right? You go through this and you're feeling all bad, and then the next day you're meeting with them and you're kind of going like this. Think, oh no, that's great. That's exactly what we needed. But there were files and files and files and files of requests. And many times the requests were duplicates of other requests. And I'd have to go in this file to put this. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I couldn't tell anybody because it's all in secret. I can't tell um, my team that we're in the middle of a due diligence process. They're wondering, and I have my work to do. I have presentations to make. I've got smiles to put on and all this other stuff. But I think a lot of it is just, yeah, it's hard. You got to embrace it and just keep on going.
Yeah. And there's a point I want to make here too, is that there's a balance in these things where, and this was a good example. Sometimes large law firms and et cetera can't help themselves, and as same with business professionals on mega, and there's tons of duplication, and part of the art of it is kind of going, look, there's a little duplication, we just need to deal with it because let's kind of keep it smooth. And then there's a element, and this came up in your situation, where enough, right? Enough, you have it, put the brakes on, close the transaction. As I put it, it's called threading the needle. And we talked numerous times through that process about, hey, let's stay aligned, let's make sure the message they're getting on the legal end is the same that you're getting. And you bought into that. I think a lot of times sellers don't. They don't understand the importance of alignment and the same message. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I think that whatever team you're working with, um, they're going to be a liaison with the buyer and the seller. Now, sometimes if that message gets mixed up, that's bad. I actually didn't have that. I didn't have that experience because whatever team you pick, and I have my recommendations, but they have to be like always on your case. Like if there's any loose ends, they need to keep coming at you and keeping you accountable. You have to be accountable for every little grain that they need. Because let me tell you, there were several times I remember, I think there were Sundays and weekends and everything. My husband was in, I think he was having something done at the hospital. I was in the car. This is when you had time to meet, and we needed to meet right then. And I appreciated that. I'm sitting there with my phone on the steering wheel because I needed to make sure that that information was handled swiftly and that we could stay aligned, because you don't want to leave people like that waiting around for things. And thread the needle, I think there were some cases where they kept asking the same thing over and over again, but it seemed to be, from what I gathered from the information that we, went back and forth on, that it wasn't a huge deal because we were pretty good with keeping documents and stuff like
For
that. I
sure.
think they were just kind of trying to, I don't know, trying to intimidate or something. Sometimes you get that feeling, but I really did not feel like we were not aligned.
In the scheme of things, because you had a great investment banker, which mattered, and you've said that,
Yes.
and you were a great client, and you're organized, and they wanted it. And there was a competitive process to a degree that was run beforehand. So
Mhm.
every deal is overdone. No one ever spends millions of dollars without overdoing it. That's just a reality. But I will say, in the scheme of things, um, not that there weren't challenges, there were. Not that all the normal deal tactics and whatever didn't come up, because they did in some way, but in the scheme of it, that was what I would consider a pretty smooth deal. And it's because A, what you brought to the table along with Paul, and B, because you had the right team.
And I'll ask this, or I'll say this. I mean, you talked about reward after the pain.
Mhm.
There was your reward, right? The sales complete, the stress just, I don't want to say disappears, but it goes somewhere else because you're at the finish line.
Yeah.
The other reward, I'm guessing, right, that you're currently experiencing is that of an earlier than planned retirement, which gives you
Mhm.
that time and freedom back to now be 100% focused on the family.
Yeah.
So tell me, one, what did it feel like when the deal was done? And two, what is next for you?
Oh boy. Well, when we signed the paper, and it was 6:30 in the morning, my time, when we met with them, and it was just kind of, there were no sirens going off. I mean, there was no brass band. We just signed it. But I think Paul and I just went, it's finished, because, we were, there was so much leading up to that split second in time where we're sitting in the room. It's kind of a cyber environment like this. And they go, "Do you approve the documents?" And we said, "Yes." And it's it's hard to explain the relief. It's almost like, being having a diagnosis held over your head, and you go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, you're fine," or something like that. It's just a weight has been lifted. But we knew that was a work day. I still went to work. I did my presentations and all of that. And um, I wanted to make sure that they knew that they had made the right purchase. And they were very, even on the last day, they told us this was one of the best acquisitions they'd ever made, because we do have pretty good EBITDA, but also just they were so pleased with our team, which made me extremely proud, because you're nothing without your team. Um, you're really not. So when I get little notes from my team, they write me little things and text me, "Oh, here's a picture of us. We're in New York City. We got to go to an exciting meeting, all these big plans." And, and I saw people that had worked with me. Omar, we got him he was still in college and getting his degree when we hired him. It's been 10 years now. And he's living the dream. He's
That's
only
really
like
fulfilling for you
29.
to see. I'll bet.
Oh, it's the best thought ever, the best feeling ever. So that's really good, because my team is thriving, because that's so important to me. So as far as moving forward, um, my husband's retired too, and now I get to spend some time with him. When you're working all the time, you don't get to spend as much time with your family. I've got, we've got two adult children. I've got two grandchildren. We go visit our grandkids, and we just enjoy each other. We've been married for a long time, and just we just are enjoying just doing some of the things that we couldn't do, we didn't have time to before. And then volunteering and stuff like that. I'm going to start volunteering and, using, we've been very, very blessed in our lives. And I never take that for granted. Our blessings in our life, and time to give back.
That's great.
That's awesome.
That's great. Speaking of giving back, one of my last questions here is, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are probably at the earlier stage where you were when you had doubts, you didn't know if you were going in the right direction? What advice would you give to those listeners?
If you're not scared a little bit, then it's probably not a great idea. You should have a little bit of self-doubt and fear. That means that you're a thinker. You're thinking through the future. So if you're just all puffed up and, oh, I've got this, I would worry a little bit, because there's going to be bumps in the road and there's going to be self-doubt. And that person who just says, I'm going to fight through it, I'm going to get through that, those are the ones that are going to succeed. And usually you can tell. I would get on the phone with people and they would be, wanting to buy a pet daycare or something like that. And I could tell in the first 5 minutes whether they were going to succeed or not, because do they want to do it and know there's hard work involved?
Mhm.
Or do they just think it's going to, smooth sailing, I'm going to do it? It's just typically not smooth sailing. There's a lot of work, or else everybody would be doing it. So I would say to them, little self-doubt never hurt anybody.
That's
Just
amazing. That's amazing
a
advice.
little bit of self-doubt is actually pretty good, but just don't let people, knock you down. You've got a vision, keep looking straight ahead, and don't worry about it. Don't worry about those competitors either. Don't look at them. That's looking back. Don't worry about the competitors. Keep looking forward. Keep your eye on the prize.
That is solid advice, Paula. And
Exceptional.
this has been an incredible interview.
Fun.
I know this goes for Pat, but for me, I love seeing good people win. And you've had a great journey and a great story. No, it's not over. I'm still going to look and see my local pickleball tournaments, see if your husband
Come
are
on
playing
and
in them. That's right.
I've got a court for both of you. I would love to play. Please come on out.
I love that.
Yeah, congratulations, Paula. You're a great person, great business woman, and you deserve the best. So,
Thank you so much.
unbelievable advice, and doesn't surprise me your success. So, privileged to hear the whole story today.
Oh yeah, well, it's been fun. So if you guys ever want to have me on BizMafia again, I'm your girl.
You are a true
Absolutely.
mafiosa.
I'm a mafiosa.
You are a
because
mafiosa.
I couldn't refuse, right?
Yes.
I couldn't refuse you two. No,
that's
you guys
right.
are awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Paula.